All right, let's jump straight in. Today we're diving into a deeply philosophical and honestly highly impassioned review by Khaled Al-Awami. In this explainer, we're unpacking his take on a striking piece of writing by the Arab thinker Ali Al-Shurafa. The article is called "The Quran is the Message of the Judge," and what we're about to explore here isn't just your standard religious essay. Al-Awami sees this text as a bold, incredibly urgent intervention in modern spiritual life. It's literally a call to strip away centuries of historical additions and go straight back to the original source.
Just take a second and think about the sheer weight of this question. Has the Quran become a distant memory in a world crowded with fatwas and narratives? This isn't just a casual shower thought, right? This is the existential dilemma framing this entire text. Al-Awami kicks off his analysis by putting this stark question right in front of us, asking whether humanity has basically drowned out the core divine message with an overwhelming maze of human-made rulings and historical narratives. So let's look at how he breaks down this crisis.
Section 1. The nation's crisis and loss.
The text paints a super vivid, honestly tragic picture of the human condition right now. Al-Awami points out that people have drifted way off course from the light of divine revelation. And, well, what happens when you lose your moral compass? You run wild. The text describes humanity as relentlessly chasing after worldly distractions. Think about it, the modern exhaustion, the endless hustle, the constant noise we're surrounded by every single day. Because of this frantic pursuit of a temporary life, humanity is basically sunk into a whirlpool of confusion and misery. It's exhausting just thinking about it.
Section 2. Ali Al-Shurafa's Call.
So here's where it gets really interesting. How does Awami interpret Al-Shurafa's article? He doesn't see it as just another dry scholarly paper. No, he describes it as a scream of pain and a highly rational wake-up call. The argument is that the nation is completely weighed down by human-made texts, things that, according to the author, God never actually authorized. Al-Shurafa's call is fundamentally about shedding all those extra layers. It's an invitation to return to the Quran, but not just for ritual reading. He's saying, adopt it as a complete way of life, a method, and a guiding spirit to actually find some peace again.
To really anchor this argument, the source material leans heavily into specific scriptural references. Listen to this verse. "And the messenger has said, O my Lord, indeed my people have taken this Quran as a thing abandoned." Al-Awami points out that this specific verse acts like an open wound right at the heart of Al-Shurafa's essay. It perfectly captures the absolute tragedy they're discussing here, the idea that the primary text has just been cast aside for other voices.
And this really illustrates the stakes of the whole argument. Al-Shurafa deduces that leaving the Quran behind isn't just some academic disagreement, It's not a minor intellectual dispute between scholars. The text frames it as a massive, devastating civilizational and spiritual tragedy. By abandoning the original book, the text argues that humanity basically threw itself into centuries of sectarian conflict, endless disputes, and this really dangerous idolization of human figures over divine guidance. We're talking about a deeply systemic failure.
Section 3. The Quran and the Prophet's Message.
Now this brings us to what is easily one of the most uncompromising verses highlighted in the article. "And if he had fabricated against us some false sayings, we would have seized him by the right hand. Then we would have cut from him the aorta." I mean, wow. Al-Shurafa uses this intensely graphic, forceful imagery from the Quran to prove a major point about the absolute purity of the divine message. It's there to show, without a doubt, that the message was heavily guarded against any human tampering whatsoever.
Let's unpack this for a second, because according to the review, this is arguably Al-Shurafa's boldest point. The argument is incredibly strictly defined. The prophet's role was solely and exclusively to deliver the revelation, to communicate, to warn, and to give glad tidings. That's it. The divine message was completely fulfilled by the Quran alone. So, by establishing that the prophet never invented his own religious sayings to add to the book, the author is aggressively protecting the religion. He's shielding it from being hijacked by human additions, historical noise, and later interpretations that just muddy the waters.
Section 4. Guidance versus Misery. Check out this absolute duality the text presents. On one side you have, whoever follows my guidance will neither go astray nor suffer. And then on the flip side, and whoever turns away from my remembrance, indeed he will have a depressed life. Al-Awami actually praises the genius of this presentation. He explains how Al-Shurafa uses these specific verses like mirrors. He's holding them up so humanity can take a good, hard look at its own reflection, its own choices, and ultimately, its destiny, depending on which path it decides to walk down.
To really drive the consequences of that choice home, the text pulls up a foundational, frankly terrifying scene of Judgment Day. The day the wrongdoer will bite on his hands in regret. He will say, "Oh, I wish I had taken with the messenger away." The source material describes this as a moment that violently shakes the heart. It acts as this massive alarm bell that simply will not stop ringing.
So what exactly is the core of this profound regret? Well, the text explains it as the ultimate devastation of realizing you blindly followed human role models, whether that's scholars, historical figures, or just societal norms, instead of the actual book of God. Al-Awami notes the deep emotional weight of this scene in Al-Shurafa's writing. It's a scene where followers are suddenly and completely abandoned by the human idols they revered. They're just left all alone with this terrible realization.
Section 5. Laylat al-Qadr and Mercy.
Now, Al-Awami highlights a really striking redefinition in the article regarding Layla al-Qadr, often known as the Night of Decree. According to this analysis, Al-Shurafa is urging readers to stop treating this as just some passing date on the calendar, or worse, an empty repeated ritual. Instead, he defines it as the monumental event of divine light descending. It's an active, living call to return to the actual core of the Quran. He's talking about genuine understanding, deep reflection, and actionable change, rather than just going through the motions of customary celebration.
And this verse right here perfectly captures the shift in the text. And when my servants ask you concerning me, indeed I am near. Just like that, the heavy, warning-filled language from the earlier sections just melts away, and it's replaced by this immense, glowing sense of hope.
Al-Awami specifically praises this part of the article for its emotional intelligence. By bringing in this concept of closeness, the entire discourse transforms. It moves away from a stark, frightening warning and turns into a wide, comforting spiritual embrace. It's reassuring the reader that, hey, no matter how far humanity has strayed into the wilderness of human texts and worldly distractions, the door of return and mercy is wide open right now to anyone genuinely seeking the light.
Section 6. The Question of Destiny. So, what's the ultimate takeaway from Ali Al-Shurafa's text? Well, as summarized by Awami, the true goal here is liberation. It is a straight-up call for personal freedom from the slavery of fear and the chains of blind obedience to human intermediaries. It heavily advocates for reestablishing a direct, completely unmediated relationship with God through the divine text. It's this passionate plea to return to the original, untainted purity, the very same word that once brought humanity out of darkness and built an entire civilization in the first place.
Which brings us right back to square one. The author leaves us with this profound, lingering thought to reflect on in our own lives. Is the Quran still present in our lives as God intended, or has it become a distant memory in a world crowded with fatwas and narratives? The text strongly suggests that the answer isn't sitting in some history book. It's hidden deep within the conscience of every single individual. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. What path will you choose? Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.
مؤسسة رسالة السلام العالمية، رسالة إنسانية لعالم أكثر سلاماً.